And joining us from Miami, Florida is Eduardo Gamarra, a professor at Florida International University who specializes in international relations. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure
Eduardo,
to be here.
You are in Miami. Describe the mood there. What have you heard and seen throughout the day?
Well, it's very interesting because contrary to what might be expected, today was a day, a very usual day, a very casual day. There have been obviously statements condemning the restoring of relations with Cuba, but there have also been individuals who are much like most of the rest of the United States, in fact, celebrating this historic occasion. So in many ways, Miami has also moved beyond this and has become part of this new inter-American setting that we currently live in.
As you mentioned, not everyone in the U.S., especially there in Florida, is celebrating these renewed ties. Talk to us about some of the concerns people still have.
Well, obviously, the main concern, we have to understand that this is a community that really has been very visible in terms of its opposition to the Cuban regime. And in particular, many people in this community either have grandparents or parents or even themselves who were victims of the politics in Cuba. And so I think it's understandable that there is such a deeply felt sentiment here by a very large part of this community, which remembers the Cuba that they left and which finds it rather unfathomable that any administration in Washington would move beyond to restore relations, given that the issues of human rights and other issues that have separated the two countries remain.
Well, what are some of the other issues between these countries that will likely remain beyond the celebrations that we've been seeing?
Well, the central one, of course, is the human rights issue. But beyond that, the embargo was largely set up as a way to try to force the Cuban government to adopt a series of reforms, not only just changing its stance on human rights, but, for example, opening up its political process to multiple political expressions, opening up the island in turn to greater economic investment on the part of Americans. But one key thing that's really important is that after the revolution, the Cuban government nationalized and confiscated a lot of property that belonged to many of the Cubans who are here, and obviously American companies who lost their property there. And so that is a central dimension of the embargo, and it's something that Republicans in both houses of the U.S. Congress are still clinging on to, and they have said on numerous occasions, if the Cubans do not, basically respond to these confiscations and unfair takeovers of American property, that we will not lift the embargo.
Would you say that this is a step forward into resolving some of those issues? We have seen some reforms already taking place in Cuba. And secondly, is there a generational gap, would you say, among Cuban Americans and Cubans when they look at this relationship now?
Yes, the first thing is very obvious. I mean, I think this is a historic moment, no matter how any side looks at it. And frankly, it really is. If you just think of where we were 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and certainly where the relations were 15 or 20 years ago, this is a historic occasion, something that it's not just an action on the part of the executive branch of the United States and the Cuban government. This has changed the relations between the United States and Cuba, but also it has changed the relations between the United States and the rest of Latin America. So that's number one. Now, here in Miami, as I was saying at the beginning, this is a community that has changed significantly. There have been generational changes. We have historically predicted that, younger generations would be less anti-Castro, less anti-Cuba than their parents. That hasn't always been the case. For example, we had the Elian Gonzalez moment when young people here, appeared to much more conservative than their parents. Yet after 2000, we seem to have a very significant generational transformation here and in Cuba. Here, that young generation welcomes this change, sees the change with great expectations, and as I think is also happening in Cuba, the younger generation also sees this with a very different eye than their parents.
All right, Eduardo Gamarra, thank you so much for joining us from Miami, Florida.
You're very welcome. Thank you.